Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Diana Bitner of True Women's Health.
And I'm Dr. Celia Egan of True Women's Health.
We're so glad you're here. Tonight we're going to talk about menopause, making it your menopause renaissance. And we both really care about this a lot. I've been a certified menopause provider now for about 15 years, and I'm so proud that Dr. Egan, internal medicine, has married internal medicine with menopause.
Yeah, I mean, I think my calling from this was I would hear so much about women talk about there is someone who knows about these hormones and what happens. And I had an inkling that I didn't know as much as I should. And so that's how we connected. And I'm so happy that I did. And I feel so honored to be able to take care of women in this phase of their life.
Yeah, it's just the coolest thing. I just hate it that women have to suffer from something that's going to happen to every woman. And yeah, like it does, it happens to every woman, be it at 35 after breast cancer, be it at 58 spontaneously.
Yeah. And, we're going to throw some stats out. And I think one of the ones that I think of the most is, 100% of women will go through menopause. I know, Dr. Bitner, I know you see women in the office and I do too. And one of the things I hear is sometimes some shame around their symptoms. And that's the one thing that I want everyone to let go of, because this is a natural part of aging. It's going to happen to all women.
It is. And there's no gold star for just kind of gritting your teeth and getting through it. And I think when we talk about it's not your mother's menopause, that's one of the things we're referring to. I think that there used to be this thought that you just kind of had to get through it and then you'd be fine. But, we know that hot flashes can get better over time, but everything else keeps going on. It's just under the surface. And so, you don't have to suffer. This isn't something that you need to hide and grit your teeth and just get through.
Yeah. And unfortunately, one would think, given that, 50% of the population is automatically going to go through this sort of phase of life, that more doctors would be in the know. But shockingly, they're not.
Yeah. And I'm proud to have been, one of the authors of a study. We surveyed residents coming out of residency programs in internal medicine, peds, internal medicine, family medicine, and OBGYN, women's health docs, right? And fewer than 10% of all of these residents were comfortable talking about menopause. It's just crazy to me.
That is crazy.
And that was surveying residents all over the country. So it's just really sad. And I love this stat that you found, right? That 75% of physicians are uncomfortable. This is post-residency out in the world. And again, I always joke that, us physicians, we like to fix stuff. We like to help women, help people. And if we're not helping, and if we don't know the answer, we might not even want to talk about it because it makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that it's just unfortunate because this is really when we see a lot of medical problems skyrocket for women, right? And this is the time when they need physicians the most.
Exactly. And so, getting some evidence-based guidance is so critical. We're going to talk tonight about what we call informed consent. Informed consent meaning you get a conversation around the pros and cons of treatment options. But I think about the perimenopause, right before menopause, it's the perfect storm, right? It's where the symptoms of menopause, such as night sweats, mood changes, heavy irregular periods, they really can cause women to feel down. It affects quality of life. But also it starts a lot of health conditions in terms of poor sleep. On the other hand, there's physiological changes that I know you'll talk more about in terms of insulin resistance, cholesterol going up. And so it comes together into this perfect storm, again, that doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And unfortunately, given the fact that so many doctors and even, OBGYNs aren't necessarily ready to sort of have a great informed consent conversation around the treatment of menopause symptoms, that leaves a good chunk of women, almost, 3/4 of women without treatment for their symptoms. And so a lot of women don't know where to go and sort of suffer in silence.
And so, yeah, that's what we want to talk about. And in terms of, we know that doctors are busy, right? So everybody is busy trying to see as many patients as they can. There's a shortage in many areas. It's hard to get into a new doc, find a new primary care doc. Visits are short in the traditional system. But yet, if a doc doesn't know, I would say, please just say, I don't know, and refer your patient to someone that does know. So it's so critical. you'll see on our credentials here, MSCP. So it's a Menopause Society certified practitioner. So it means that we've taken a test that it was actually pretty hard about menopause symptoms and health conditions that are affected by menopause.
And I think that that's so important to know because even being an internal medicine side, I think there were so many things I learned even more so studying for that test and sort of continuing to educate ourselves within the menopause space. That's so important that I use on a day-to-day basis with my patients in the office.
Yeah, and just last week, I was at the Menopause Society in person. Dr. Egan and Suzanne were able to attend virtually, and I learn every year. I learn about new treatment options. I learn new data around osteoporosis and bone health, and it was just a packed, and we actually posted some segments of conversations around what we learned at menopause. But yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So I think we're going to start off talking about a few of like menopause myths. And I just want to pause because I think we didn't mention this quite right away. If anybody has any comments or questions, we love to field questions. This is supposed to be a back and forth conversation between any patients out there or viewers. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat as we go through.
Yeah, and just tell us you're there. We love to see shout outs of people who are regulars or new to our platform. We love that. But I love you talking about the myths, Celia.
So one of the first myths, there's no such thing as a menopause doctor. Obviously, we've kind of just talked about that, right? There is such a thing. And they're made up of family medicine, GYNs, OBs, internal medicine, maybe some other doctors that are really excited to sort of help women in this phase of life.
As well as some certified midwives are certified,
yeah.
PAs, nurse practitioners, right? So it's just so important to look for that certification. And you can always go to a website as well called menopause.org to find a certified provider in your area if you're not in one of the states that we're able to take care of patients. So it's so important to make sure you're seeing a certified provider. One of the big issues, of course, is that there are 60 million women in the country with menopause. There are only 1,200 certified providers. So we're working on getting more people to get that certification.
Yeah. All right. Myth number 2. Menopause symptoms don't last long. Ooh, I think if you're viewing it from a narrow scope, that may be somewhat closer to the truth. But in really starting to pay attention to my patient's symptoms, in this, phase of life, I feel like menopause symptoms start quite early when you're really starting to pay attention.
Right. So as early as 44, women can get night sweats. Even if they're still having periods, they might get night sweats. They might get worse headaches, some joint pain, mood changes. It's a big deal. And even when the hot flashes start to get better, maybe 4 years after menopause really starts, more than 12 months from a period, then the vaginal dryness can set in, the low libido can set in, the depression, the mood disturbance. So certain symptoms maybe don't last that long, but there's always a symptom.
Yeah. All right. Myth number 3, only severe menopause symptoms need to be treated. I mean, I think it's a little bit hard because when we talk about extreme symptoms for any one person, even a small night sweat that interrupts your sleep every once in a while, that's probably severe to that patient. So even if collectively, we're saying on average, the symptoms aren't particularly severe, to that one person, it is a problem. And so any sort of symptom deserves treatment. Not only that, but as Dr. Bitner knows, there really wasn't a great way of monitoring symptoms. And so it's hard to even know what that means for some of this data, because only more recently we had some scales that we use at our office that Dr. Bitner sort of helped create to sort of look at severity of symptoms and even what that means for patients.
Exactly. And I was just a part of a survey with other colleagues, and we found that if women aren't having serious hot flashes, they're not even sure if they have menopause. Of course, they haven't had a period. They might have newer depression, lower sex drive. So again, hot flashes, severe hot flashes aren't just, the one thing that might need to be treated. There's so many other things going on, even on the inside, that you might not be so aware of.
Yeah. And I think in particular, I think one of the things that women tend to forget or tend to sort of just assume happens with age is bone thinning. And that's a very severe symptom of menopause that can lead to fractures, pain, and shorten someone's life, 10 to 20 years away from menopause. But that's something that is severe, and it always should be part of the conversation when we're talking about sort of treatment options for this phase of life.
So I would say, yeah, when any symptom is happening, it's the time to really know where your body's at in all these different areas of wellness. And, that first night sweat is a time to get your act together, to get as healthy as you can, to find out what you need to do, and make some decisions.
All right. Any other myths out there? Hormone therapy isn't an option because it's not safe.
Oh, this makes me crazy, right? We call it the zombie idea. This idea will not be killed, even though we throw so much data at it. So this was a notion back in 2003, and we've disproven it so much for most women. Now, some women, it's not safe. Women who have had breast cancer, they've had a blood clot in their lung. There are certain things that would make it not safe to start. And our number one goal at True is to keep women safe. Number two, happy. Right. But number one, safe. And so we're very careful and make sure we do informed consent.
Yeah. I think even in my view as an internal medicine doctor, I was sort of trained about hormone therapy not being a particularly great option. And I feel like definitely my views changed on this almost a 180 and kind of reviewing in more detail some of the data, and particularly in patient experience of understanding just how great sometimes hormone therapy can be as a treatment option for patients.
Right. And I really believe that women deserve to know what's safe for them based on the evidence, not just based on a certain doctor's opinion because of lack of knowledge. Right. So every woman deserves to know really based on the evidence if it's safe for them or not.
Yeah. All right. Myth number 5, once you're in menopause, it's all downhill. Say goodbye, kiss your sex life goodbye, and that body, forget it.
I'm 57. I sure as heck hope this is not true. No, and I'll say it's not.
I particularly think that it would be a bummer to, think about your sex life. Like, that's only one half of your life, right? The other half just going sexless. That seems like a boring point of view.
Exactly. So, it's all about knowing, again, just knowing what the options are.
Yeah. All right. We're going to talk about some treatment options to sort of get your menopause symptoms under control and just sort of talk. So, Dr. Bitner, what's some of your insight about just kind of the beginning of how you think about treatment options for patients?
Well, here at True, it really helps because we have a whole sheet of options. On one side of the paper are the options, and the other side are all the symptoms. So it's looking at what symptom and what treatment option. But number one, it's thinking, what does the patient in front of me care about? What is hard for her? What is the symptom that she really needs to address initially? And then we start thinking wider about this. And one thing that we use to look at this is the symptom circle. So Missy, if you want to pull this up. So the symptom circle was my first invention. And I invented this because I was trying to understand it myself. And I wanted to show women that they weren't crazy. So I'll never forget when this first came out, a woman took it to her work and she was jokingly charging her friends 25 cents a turn. But as you look at this, you click on it. And so let's say mood swings. Okay, let's stay at hot flashes. On the top is what the symptoms are made worse by. And on the bottom is what they can be improved by. So this is all evidence-based. It's a great tool to have. You can check it out on the website, or here at True, we have the paper copies actually. It can be, again, a really helpful tool. Celia, when you first saw this, what did you think? Or how would you use this in your practice?
I think even a lot of times we'll see patients that are just sort of tipping into the place of, I'm having some problems. What does this mean? Just the beginning conversation, I think, around, hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, sort of all these symptoms together. And I think it's just such a great way to start a conversation as to, one, providing a guilt-free conversation, right? This is not your fault that these symptoms are happening. It's not your fault maybe that your libido went in the pooper. And, here's something to do about it, something concrete to see, and almost, and obviously if you're coming to our office, something to hold. And it just feels, I think, so empowering for patients.
Yeah. It just shows it very objectively that these symptoms are real. Right. And yeah, I love how you say, again, shame-free, like these are not to be ashamed of. It's kind of like, do we ask you to be ashamed for having symptoms of puberty, right? Like menopause is the same thing. It's kind of like we were joking before we went on about, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. It's the same thing. We want to say, are you there, God? It's me, Jane. I've got symptoms of menopause and I don't know what's going on.
And I think sometimes it can be really eye-opening, particularly see a trigger, because a lot of the times that will connect, in women's minds, oh my gosh, yes, that is true, right? Ugh, like I do notice that every time when maybe I have, way too much sugar at night, that my net sweats are way worse. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm not crazy, right? That is something that happened,
Right.
and something that they can start to sort of tackle.
And years ago, we used to think that women who carry extra weight, especially extra body fat, we used to think that maybe that would protect them from hot flashes because we store certain estrogen byproducts or estrogen metabolites in our fat, and that would help. And actually, it doesn't. We know that women who carry extra body fat actually have more hot flashes and night sweats because it's like wearing a sweater you can't take off. And so it actually creates insulation, which makes the hot flashes worse. And it can just be one more reason to maybe take a closer look at all the ways that one could lose even 5 or 10 pounds just to get that extra weight off, which really can make the hot flashes and night sweats better.
Yeah. So once you sort of have your symptom circle, I know that we also not only sort of get women going with some basic sort of triggers and treatment options, but we also use something called our menopause tracking scale, which I also think has been just so helpful in my own practice of understanding where patients are starting at and then where they're going from there. I don't know if you want to kind of talk a little bit about we call it the MTS, or the menopause tracking scale.
Missy, if you want to show it. Yeah. So I actually did a pilot study in 2008 of how to help women walk through a system of care. And when I started this, there wasn't any other scale that really made sense. There was the green scale. It was really long. It was a 5-point Larkart scale. Long story short, there was no other symptom. Yeah, Miss, you can leave it right here. There was no other symptom scale that I really liked. And so I came up with the main 7 symptoms and looked at all the scales and pulled this together, looked at the data. And then I asked a lot of patients, how would you think about this? What words make sense to you? And I put this together in a scale. Then I asked a lot of my colleagues, does this make sense to you? Is there anything else you want to know? And then I wanted to keep it simple. So instead of a 5-point, yes or no, or maybe, I just came up with 3 is good, 1 is bad. Us women, we like to see things go up as they get better. So creating a graph, we wanted the line to go up. And so basically it's going through this. So for example, how would you rate your weight? Just in language that makes sense. I'm overweight, but not losing. Or hard, I'm obese or gaining. How would you rate your energy? Again, this was from people telling me just some words that made sense. Like a 2 is moderate, mostly rested in the morning, good and bad days. 1, it's hard every day. How would you rate your libido? Thinking about 3 is it's easy, and also now we've added to 3, some women aren't having sex, don't have much of a sex drive, but they're okay with it. There's no distress. There's no distress in the relationship. There's no distress personally. Then it's not a problem. If it's not a problem, it's not a problem. And of course, 1 is it's really a difficult issue. So again, as we go down, then we can track. So when women come in and initially, let's say their score might be a 14, whoa, we've got work to do. And she can see, it's metrics to keep us all accountable. How do you use this, Celia, when you see people?
I mean, a very similar way of sort of starting out at the beginning of sort of seeing where symptoms are at. And I think it can be helpful for patients, even when they leave the office, to come back to their MTS, because on their own, because, a lot of the times we'll have different treatment options, but really patients are doing different things on their day-to-day that they're trying out and sort of seeing if something works over another. And it can be so helpful to do even without a provider. Sometimes some of these, questionnaires or scales that we have for a variety of different other conditions can feel just so clinically heavy, and it can be hard to interpret without a doctor. What I love about this is that I do think a patient on their own, a woman on their own at home, can kind of run through this and kind of get a sense of where they're at.
And actually, it did a study that compared this scale to other scales that are available and validated. And there's a scale called the MenQual. And what we found out is that women doing the MenQual without coaching couldn't finish it correctly. Things didn't make sense. But 98% of women finished the MTS correctly, and it was validated against other scores, such as the sexual desire scale, the PHQ, which is a scale about depression. So we were able to correlate it and validate it against that scale. So anyways, everyone, this is on the website. You can fill it out and have it as an example, or a way to just assess your symptoms. A fun fact, I just got an email from a group in Turkey who want to validate it in Turkish for women in Turkey. So we'll have a look at that. But really, really fun to know that this is a tool that can help lots of women.
Yeah. And even if, something that you're not even sure that maybe you're in menopause or these symptoms are starting, I think even looking at something like energy, maybe something for, younger women has changed and they're just not sure why. And that can be just so eye-opening to be like, oh, this is a part of that. And right, maybe I need to do something to sort of boost my energy, or maybe there's some small changes I can make as time goes on to bump that up.
100%. And sometimes, like I saw a gal today, when she first saw, she was 13 and now she's a 20. And so obviously she's gotten better, but we talked about, for example, she's chosen to take hormones, but I said, if you get a hot flash, I want you to use this. And as we segue into the seeds, it's like to think about, okay, hormones don't fix it all. A healthy lifestyle is the foundation. And so we've got to look at the seeds and say, as you drink your water, sometimes if you don't drink your water, that can cause a hot flash, even if you're taking hormones.
Yeah. So in getting into sort of the beginning of treatment options, we're going to review what we call our seeds, or the 7 essential elements of daily success, which I think is just a great rundown of some of the really important backbones of, what women need to do to just get it going, make it turn towards a healthier body and a healthier mind.
Yeah. I remember, people would say, can I just have a pill and just be done with this? I'm like, no, it starts with a healthy lifestyle. So, we came up with this list and it's really stuck. Of course, we're working on making it better and more practical, but just as a starting point, this is a good starting point. We could argue all day, does someone really need 80 ounces of water? It's just a starting point. It's thinking about, overall what's important. And I think about net water, how much water minus how much coffee minus how much alcohol. And so it's making sure that we've got a balance there.
Yeah. And we always say we don't particularly love this as just another list to give women to do, because women have tons of lists and things that they're doing to take care of their family and their, what they do at work and their parents and their partners. But, even it can be helpful just to pick one thing once a week and be like, I'm really going to focus on getting my water, or for the next month, like I'm really going to prioritize my sleep, and really trying to find a balance of sort of circulating to all the different things. A lot of the times one thing may come really natural to one person, but maybe not to others, right? So I'm always been a bit of an active person and an exerciser. So for me, that wasn't particularly something that I needed to focus a ton on, but like I was not getting any water and really not doing the mind-body connection piece. And so for me, that was something that made a lot of sense to just think about.
Well, in fiber, I would talk about fiber all the time in terms of having regular formed bowel movements, reducing risk of vaginal infections, making that part of one's life a lot easier, knowing basics about colon health. But Dr. Egan, you've really taught me about how fiber really helps. When a food is higher in fiber, it slows down the release of sugar, and it helps our blood glucose, and it helps with weight, and it helps with symptoms. So, getting that 35 grams of fiber a day, having that fiber sheet that you've created is so critical. And it's really helped me a lot, not have to take a fiber pill, but also how to explain, even more details around this factor of the seeds.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, is it exactly 35 grams that every person needs? That's one of those things we're never going to truly know. And every body's a little bit different, but in general, it can be just a good backbone to try to shoot for, just as you're trying to put your meals together from day to day and week to week.
100%. And, in terms of activity, we think about, how many steps do we need? 10,000 steps for weight loss. Again, for some that works, for some, they might need more. And we talk about cardio exercise in terms of like zone 2. We talk about strength training. So again, this is just a really good backbone to start to think about it. And I tend to do my stretching when I'm doing my gratitudes at night. So it's like, how can we make these easy to do, not hard to do?
Yeah. We sort of skipped over sleep. I think sleep's one of those ones that, for a lot of women, they're like doing stuff for their family at night or working into the wee hours of the night, which I I just commend all these women for doing all these awesome things. But at the same time, I always harp in the office about, taking care of your body, and your body desperately needs sleep. And so I know it can sometimes be a hard choice to put away the computer or not do that extra sort of school project, but really, it's so helpful to focus on getting at least 50 hours of sleep. And if you missed one because of a deadline or some sort of family activity, really trying to carve out some time to make those hours up.
Exactly. And, for so many people, it just helps even to set an alarm to go to bed, just like you'd set an alarm to wake up, because you might get lost even in just a little mindless scrolling before bed, right? Watching Instagram or something, just having that alarm go off to go to bed. It can be like, okay, I need to prioritize this.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be helpful if you do find that you're struggling with sleeping. That could be a trigger to maybe talk to your doctor about some other treatment options for maybe something like night sweats or anxiety. And so it can be sort of a cue to have a more broader conversation about getting enough sleep.
100%. And so many people have what we call WASO, waking after sleep onset. And, based on Dr. Thurston's work from Pittsburgh, she's shown that women who have persistent WASO, that waking at 2 or 3 in the morning, actually have a much higher risk of dementia. And she has actually found with brain imaging that there are early changes of dementia in women who have decades of WASO. So again, that waking at 2 a.m., it's so important to go to your seed of mind-body connection. It's having that gratitude, getting your brain out of flight or fight, and getting back to sleep. And if you have persistent sleep disturbance, it's to talk to a menopause certified doc around what are my options to help me sleep better.
One of the things that we find, sort of in my space of, nutrition and weight management is a lot of times, sometimes women can have WASO if they're not eating the right things during the day. And particularly sometimes our sugars can be bottoming out at night if we're maybe getting too much alcohol or too many simple carbohydrates later in the day. And basically, as your liver's not able to keep up with that balance with the alcohol and sugar, and it's not allowed to support our blood sugars as we go through the night and we're not eating. And then as your blood sugar falls, it sets off all these catecholamine surges because it's like, wake up, this is not good. We need to fix whatever the sugar problem is. And then it ends up, we just get that WASO where we kind of wake up and we're not really sure what's happening. So a lot of the times, if you feel like it's not necessarily night sweats and you don't feel like you're particularly anxious, sort of taking a look at your evening dinner or even the food that you've eaten early in the day can be really helpful at trying to balance those sugars and trying to get some sleep.
Yeah. I saw a patient earlier this week, and it's so fun because she first saw us about a month ago. She was in perimenopause, not really at the point that she wanted to focus on, hormones. It wasn't really time for that, but she was having this WASO, and we were talking about her diet. And I said, would you do me a favor? Would you just try a continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks? And my theory is that you're having low blood sugars in the night. And she first put it on, and her blood sugars at night were just up and down, lows and high and low and high. So, her body was just in adrenaline rushes, right? And she was sleeping terrible. And she learned, again, from all that Dr. Egan's taught me and what we teach here at True. She got a little frustrated. It took about 5 days, and she just honed in on her balance of protein and complex carbs later in the day. Got rid of the glass of wine for at least during the week, and her blood sugars evened out, and she slept so much better. She felt so empowered that she was able to understand why. She was able to fix it with simple changes to her diet, and now she's sleeping, and she might have added just years to her life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. Yeah,
and she's not cranky.
And right. Let's hope her libido went up too, probably.
That's right. The two didn't go together. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So again, we've gone.
I'm afraid you're going to forget stuff. I have our list here.
No, we went through rapid fire, so much information. So I don't know, obviously if anyone has questions about what we talked about or any feelings about maybe the MTS or seeds or personal experiences that you'd like to share, we'd love to sort of hear that feedback, good or bad, of course, right? We love to not hear anything that's coming on. Yeah. And in terms of other, we sort of ran through seeds and terms of, kind of a basic outline for wellness, but it can be really helpful too, to even just think about your overall mindset of coming into menopause and sort of not thinking about it as a time to be fearful of, but almost a time to embrace.
Yeah, it's again your menopause renaissance. This doesn't have to be a time where it's downhill. We talk about, wellness instead of women reaching a peak at the menopause transition, let's say early 50s, and then the rest of her health is downhill. I really do believe it's possible, and I believe you do too, is that we can sort of see our health go up and just stay up until, let's say, we're 100 and we die of something on a beach, when we're 102. So it's like, how can we keep our wellness high? And one way is addressing menopause.
Yeah. And I think that it's, even in addition to, sometimes menopause can be signs that we maybe need to make some changes, right? Maybe we're burning at the candle at both ends, right? Of working really hard and trying to do our families, and now we can't sleep, and maybe we're having some of these symptoms, and maybe that's almost like a gift to be able to pause and say, you know what, I need to focus on myself a little bit, right? And that's totally okay. We talk about self-care a lot of the times is like, getting a massage or getting your nails done, which is totally awesome, and I think that you should do that. But a lot of the times too, it's getting a glass of water, buying a new water bottle so that you have something that's available, prioritizing your sleep, right? Doing all these other things that that really are going to get your body in total to a better place.
Well, and it's even doing some meal planning whenever that works for you, and taking to work some high protein, healthy complex carbs. So you're not grabbing just whatever, like I was doing today with my peanut butter and my nut thins. So it's just like, and we're not looking for perfection here, right? Everything in moderation. But it's really making those preparations so we can make the right choices when we get stressed out.
Yeah. And I think knowing that all of us are sort of in this together, right? Again, this is going to happen to all of us. It's, there's not one thing that you can do to prevent this from coming. There's so much that you can do to make the journey better, right? And your own time for you to sort of shine and kind of get these things together for your life. But knowing that we're sort of all in this together, I think can be so helpful.
And it can be very empowering. The other thing I love about menopause in terms of talking about it as a gift, right? It really makes us look at our risk for heart disease. So for example, recently had a patient who has a strong family history of heart disease. And we talk about menopause being the most dramatic risk factor for heart disease for women, that within 5 years, their risk will be equal or greater than that of a man of dying from first heart attack and more likely to have a heart attack. So you're the internal medicine, feel free to correct my facts. But, just recently we had a patient who had a strong family history of heart disease. Her dad died of a heart attack prematurely. And she had been told by her doc, hey, your lipids are fine. Just, eat better and exercise more. And she came wondering about wanting to take a deeper dive into this. And so I ordered what's called a CAC for her. And she was in early menopause. And so her CAC was actually positive. She already had some beginnings of early heart disease. Went to a cardiologist, and he also told her what we did. You can't fix genetics with a better diet. So she chose to go on a statin. Her cholesterol levels are much better. And now she's empowered to say, okay, I can take hormones. I can make all these other decisions for myself. And I don't have to suffer heart disease like my family members did.
Yeah. And I think, heart disease will continue to further understand as sort of time goes on, but it's it's the number 1 killer of women, right? And it's something that does not get enough press and play. We sort of think about a lot of other reasons why women, how their lives will end, but really heart attacks and cardiovascular disease is the primary reason. And every woman should have I almost am thinking when I talk to a woman for the first time, I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to prove to myself that she doesn't have it, not just assuming that she doesn't because of the way that, things are just on average. And, I always joke that as your primary care doctor and as a patient in my office, worst case scenario is out of the blue, oh, she had a heart attack. Like, I don't want to hear that for any of my patients, right? I really want everyone to know to the nth degree exactly where they're at in terms of their cardiovascular risk. And so everyone deserves to sort of have that conversation in particular. And what's really exciting is that you can change a lot of those risk factors with the newer medications that are out, with some other lifestyle stuff. And it's, you do have control over sort of, 1, understanding what your true risk is at, and then 2, sort of making some changes.
And, even at the True team meeting this morning, we were celebrating some real wins for our patients recently with dropping their what's called A1C, or their average blood sugar, over 3 months. The risk, diabetes is one of the biggest causes of cardiovascular disease. And so to actually see women who have diabetes and can normalize their blood sugars with medication, with hormones, with seeds, with support, with it's just becoming a very common story around here that we're seeing women drop their blood sugars.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so exciting. I mean, I always, as an internal medicine doctor, we don't tend to get as many wins as the surgeons do. And so I had always made a joke that when I see people change their hemoglobin A1C, it feels so, as a doctor, so like exciting. And I'm like, is this how surgeons feel when you can change someone's life like this? How amazing.
It's like after a hysterectomy, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so I think, one of the things that we've seen, which I think asterisk to all of this, is that it's been time. I think sometimes women come in and expect a turnaround in 4 weeks. And unfortunately, that's just not how women's bodies work, particularly at this phase of life. And so, over time, we do see these changes, and they can happen. And they're just so exciting, because I truly believe that we've had decades to some of these women's lives of fixing their blood sugars, dropping. We've seen numbers of 50, 70, 80 pounds. I mean, that is just so exciting to be able to give women back some of this freedom to move their bodies, freedom to live longer. And that's truly what it is.
I had a patient who said to me, I said, what do you want? She said, I want to do what I want, when I want, where I want it, how I want it. I just want to feel like myself. And that's what we get to do every day.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a bit about, I love how you talk about eating and those signals for eating. And we know those signals can change with menopause, right? With insulin sensitivity, with how we handle our sugar.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the times, what we've just talked about are sort of just kind of facts around eating a little bit, right? Making sure you're getting fiber, eating healthy, maybe limiting sugars. That's all fine and dandy, right? But a lot of the times, women's real struggle is they're like, Dr. Egan, I know how to eat. I get it. I get that I should, limit my sugars and do all this healthy eating, but I can't, right? Why? Because I had a long day, my kids are crazy, my partner's crazy, and I come home from work, and all that there is the things that I know I shouldn't eat, and I can't stop myself. Right. And so what we love to talk about sort of in our office is understanding your relationship with food and your mindset around food. And what can be frustrating sometimes in menopause is you lose a little bit with that lack of estrogen, that extra sort of oomph to sort of make a better choice. And it almost feels as though your ability to sort of stay on track goes away. The good news is some of changing your mindset around your relationship with food. And we sort of coach people through some of these like mindful eating exercises that we do, in addition to sort of optimizing your health in other ways, and plus or minus adding different medications, can really help support your journey. And it's not always that something that you have to be on forever, but it is sort of the beginning of this sort of new phase of supporting your overall sort of emotional health around eating and finding a good balance. Unfortunately, with a lot of dietary culture, it's a lot of restrictions, like you just can't eat anything from this one group, and that can feel super frustrating. And a lot of the times your brain's really tricky. It will allow you to do that for a period of time. But then as time goes on, your brain starts to be like, you know what? I really think that this is a bad plan. And then those cravings just start building and building and building. And then all of a sudden you're completely off whatever health plan at all. And it's very difficult to stay on track. And so it can be helpful to sort of have an understanding of where you're at and give yourself some permission and understand some ways to do that, to sort of eat foods that, maybe aren't the healthiest, but still finding that balance, knowing that you're fueling your body most of the time.
Exactly. I saw a patient the other day who said, does this mean I can never have a Reese's Pieces ever again? And I'm like, no, it just means that you need to go for a walk after you have your little bag of Reese's Pieces.
Yeah.
Reese's Pieces, whatever. So it's just, it's like, it's just knowing how to work that into your larger system. But I love how you talk about your relationship with food, about thinking about, why do I want that?
Yeah. I always say, food controls you. I'm sorry, you control food. Food doesn't control you. So food controlling you is, Dr. Bitner, I'm going to throw you in the bus, right? I'm having a busy day, and all I can think about right now is that peanut butter in the pantry, that it's calling to me. That's food controlling you. That's not the time to have peanut butter necessarily, right? But you controlling food is, you know what? I want some peanut butter and bananas, and that's what I want. And I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to smell it, and I'm going to love it. But then I'm going to close that chapter and sort of get on with my life because I know that that's what I wanted in that moment. And
well, and I accepted your challenge. I didn't have it for 10 days to readjust my relationship with peanut butter. And it's much better today. I needed peanut butter. Plus, I didn't bring anything else to eat. So, you know, I got through it. But it's like, I don't think about it all the time anymore. It was just that, yeah.
It is like a siren. I mean, it is truly like a siren song sometimes, these foods that get locked in. And it can be hard because our world does not support us eating healthy, right? I mean, you walk into Meijer's and, no offense, a grocery store, right? And there's Halloween candy everywhere. And again, I get it. Like, that's just sort of where we are. But you have to sort of acknowledge that the world is not supporting you in that way, right? You go to a restaurant, they plop a bread bowl with that amazing butter right down in front of you, right? It's okay to know that you may be challenged and it's going to be difficult to sort of always make the right decision in that place. But learning some tools and learning how to fuel your body most of the time is the next best step in sort of getting to where you want to be.
Exactly. And I think, you know, having said that in terms of, you know, thinking about how we're eating, it's also that self-image of not wanting to lose control, right? Like, you know, I want to feel like I'm in control, but I feel really bad when I might lose control and eat too much peanut butter. So how do you talk to people about that in terms of their self-image and how they see themselves?
So, you know, what we're talking about, we're going to sort of name it, you know, like that pull or that call, we call it like a craving. And I always tell women, you know, your cravings aren't what make you up. They're a reflection of what's going on, right? So I have dark hair. Dark hair is who I am. But if I have a craving, it's probably because maybe I didn't sleep very well. Maybe my hormones aren't in the right place. Maybe I had a stressful day. And maybe I'm surrounded by foods that all I can do is smell donuts. So that's going to crank my cravings way up. That doesn't mean that I particularly am a bad person because I'm having cravings all the time. You know, when we talk about sort of eating or even that ping to eat, a great question can be, am I hungry? Is this hunger, which is coming from inside, right? My belly's empty, it's growling, I need some fuel. Or is this just a craving? I just want sweet, salty, a crunch, just food, and try to understand where that's going. And again, a craving is usually a reflection of what's going on in your life, not necessarily what you've made up. And so it can be so helpful to sort of pull yourself aside from that and be curious to, how did I get in this place where I'm having all these cravings, right? Maybe I'm having terrible night sweats and I just haven't slept well in days, right? And let me focus on sleeping better, treating my night sweats, and then the cravings will get better. And that's okay. And that's a great path to sort of get started on versus feeling a lot of guilt around, oh my gosh, I have all these cravings and they never end and I'm a bad person.
Right. Sometimes I've figured out one of my triggers is if I get a little overwhelmed, like I've got too much to do and I don't know where to start, I'm going to have some popcorn. I'm going to have some peanut butter, right? So what I really try to plan is when I feel like that, if I make a list, it takes away that feeling of being overwhelmed and then I don't need to eat extra calories that I don't need. So I think having a plan of what to do, once you've identified the trigger, okay, what am I going to do instead of eat empty calories that I'm going to feel bad about 15 minutes later?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because your brain works just like any other sort of pleasure center, right? You get this initial peak and then you get the fall. The fall feels terrible, right? Like we feel guilty and shameful. And then it creates that vicious loop. But now we just want that pleasure cycle again. And so again, one is just having a lot of self-compassion around your cravings and sort of, you know, where you're at. And then two, it's sort of naming where you're going and then having a plan for what that looks like. I also tell a lot of women to sort of rate their cravings, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being, oh my God, I'm gonna like claw my face off unless I have this. And 1 being like, maybe a little. A lot of times it provides some sort of objective measurements around how you're feeling, right? If it's a 1 or 2, have a glass of water, take some deep breaths and see if you can power through. Your cravings come like a wave, they'll peak and they'll fall. The big question is, can you ride that wave out, right? And again, sometimes it's your birthday and you want a piece of cake and that's okay too, right? And it's just sort of finding this balance.
Exactly. And, you know, we talk a lot at True around community. Like here we are on Facebook Live and there's lots of people watching and we're able to, you know, share with our community. We hope this community grows more and more of women who want to learn more. and support each other. It's supporting each other around cravings, around symptoms, around all that's going on in menopause. So again, this is not your mother's menopause in the sense of back in the day, women didn't talk about this stuff. They felt ashamed. They felt like they weren't strong enough. Now we see more and more women talking, sharing, being a lot more honest around these symptoms. And, you know, even about cravings, like, oh, what do you do when you get a craving? Well, this is what I do. What do you do? Right?
Yeah. And even just having the conversation, I think even particularly about weight, I had a friend recently who was asking me a little bit about her weight gain that she's had. You know, she's in the perimenopausal time, and her OB had told her that it was her settling weight, which I wasn't. I was like, is that scientific? I don't think that that's something. I was just making, obviously that's not scientific, and that's not a thing. Your settling weight is not a thing. But I just thought that I just was sort of thinking how amazing it was that we were sharing this information, because a lot of times women would not really share that and sort of want to acknowledge that they maybe had gained, 5 or 10 pounds. So I think that's great that we're in this place that we can sort of be together and sort of figure this out all together.
Mm-hmm. So, we've talked about so much. I think the most important thing I want people to leave with tonight is that you all deserve, again, informed consent. And just a brief Jane story. So Jane is the fictional patient I always use, and there might be tidbits of truth from different patients I've seen. But Jane, let's just call her Jane. She was, 52 with lots of symptoms of menopause. And she had a family history of breast cancer, and they had genetic testing, and turns out it was not a genetic reason. And so for Jane, it would be very reasonable to consider estrogen. We know that estrogen, especially by itself, and she had had a hysterectomy and didn't need to take a progesterone. So especially women who get to take estrogen by itself, it does not increase their risk of breast cancer. And heaven forbid they get breast cancer taking the estrogen. We know from anecdotal studies or observational studies that women actually do better when they get their breast cancer if they're taking estrogen. So again, it's complicated, right? But it's a discussion and it's a fair choice. So this woman saw another OBGYN, and she was told, Jane was told, yeah, I guess you could have some estrogen. How about just a really low dose, and we'll wean it off over 18 months. And then the doctor thought for a little bit and said, no, I've changed my mind. Let's just give you a medicine that will fix the thermostat. So, and Jane left the visit saying, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? Like, she decided what she thought. There was no discussion. It was just told to me. So again, I believe Jane and every other woman deserves an informed consent. Here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the risks, here are the benefits. These are the ways you can take it. This is the option. And for example, we talked about different options, and she chose to start a medicine called Duo-V. Duo-V is synthetic estrogen, conjugated equine estrogen, Premarin, was the old brand name, with a basodoxifene. Basodoxifene is a SERM. A lot of details here, but it's a medicine like tamoxifen, which is used to reduce risk of breast cancer recurrence. Basodoxifene is its cousin. It's in a hormone pill called Duo-V, and it actually is thought to be breast protective, and it protects the lining of the uterus. And so, especially for women who have a higher risk, then the Duo-V can be a really good option. And again, likely will show to be breast protective. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Summarize it.
I mean, I think it speaks to, one, the need to see someone who's a menopause provider, because they need to be up to date on all of these sort of treatment options, right? But two, that women deserve this complicated explanation. There's a lot of thought into this, right? And you deserve it as a patient and as a woman.
Exactly.
Good. So, all right, we're gonna do our take-home tips. All right, take-home tip number 1. You will go through menopause. I'm on the pre-end of this, so I'm waiting for it like everyone else. And your symptoms are not your fault, and you don't have to suffer in silence.
Ba-boom.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna leave it at that. Number 2, know your phase of ovarian function. So, every woman needs to know exactly where they're at in their reproductive phase. One that provides guidance on, treatment options, and or if they're where they're at with their symptoms. You also need to know this because where you're at can greatly change your risk of chronic disease and life-altering pathology that may be happening. So every woman should sort of know where they're at and get a better understanding of what that looks like.
Right. And for example, if you know you're in late perimenopause, you know your symptoms are going to really increase. You're going to have times of really high estrogen and breast tenderness and bloating and crying and acne. And you're going to have times of really low estrogen, irritability, night sweats, and maybe a headache. So it's just really good to know this is where I'm at. This is what I can expect.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, start with seeds. Even if you're not a patient at True, I mean, download the seeds ebook and just start thinking about it, right? Pick one, get started, reflect on what you can do to sort of add some of these things into your life.
Yeah.
Overall, I think that in general, you know, that they'll probably most likely help your symptoms, but in general, they're just things that women should just do. Start thinking about ways to adding that in.
Yeah. A lot of people will print this off and just put it up on the mirror in the bathroom in the morning or put it on the fridge. So
yeah,
it's just, they say it's a really good reminder.
Yeah. All right. Number 4, what is the role of HRT in your life? And actually, Dr. Bitner, you corrected. We're changing this nomenclature, aren't we? Just so that everyone knows.
Yeah, we're saying the acronym now is MHT, menopause hormone therapy. So we're not trying to replace exactly what your over used to make. We're trying to, offer you enough as an option to treat the symptoms of, for example, hormones at a level that's safe for you, that's appropriate for you, but again, not trying to replace. So MHT is becoming the new acronym.
Yeah. And I love, one of my favorite things that we do at True is we draw tons of pictures. So if you are ever a patient, get ready to look at our silly drawings. But one of my favorite things to do is that I've learned from Dr. Bitner is to draw out, the estrogen levels during reproductive phase and perimenopausal phase, and then showing like, where are we ballpark trying to get with MHT, right? And a lot of women are like, oh, that, like, everyone's sort of thinking that it's these like outrageously high levels. And we're like, no, we are not trying to get to what we would call supra therapeutic levels, meaning way beyond where you're at your peak phase. That is not the goal here.
Well spoken.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
And any woman who is within the perimenopause time, I always say, you sort of need to decide, is this something that's going to be part of my life or it's not, right? Am I going to seek out a doctor who understands this or am I not? And it's okay if you don't want to, that's a choice that you need to make, but you at least need to know that it's something that you should reflect on at one time or another.
Exactly. And again, we could talk about all treatment options. For example, there's a new drug out called Veozah, and Veozah works on the thermostat of the brain. And so for women, here we are, number 5, there are options beyond MHT. So for example, Veozah works really well on hot flashes and night sweats. Our patients who have started it, because it just came out, they say within 24 hours, 48 hours, their hot flashes are gone. I mean, no lie. And it's safe for women who have had breast cancer. It's a non-hormonal treatment for hot flashes and night sweats and menopause. So
yeah, that's
super exciting. Super exciting.
Yeah. All right. And I also think that it's even beyond, we didn't really touch as much about vaginal dryness and sort of general urinal syndrome, which is basically, I always say, like the undercarriage takes a bit of a pooper once you lose that estrogen signaling. But there's a lot of other like pelvic floor exercises and a lot of other options that are available to help the general urinal syndromes that come with menopause as well, beyond sort of MHT.
Exactly. We know that mild symptoms can be treated with, let's say, a moisturizer and lubrication, but moderate to severe symptoms are just not treated unless we're using, let's say, vaginal estrogen. We have the Mona Lisa laser that works to treat the symptoms without hormones. So yes, there are lots of options.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for women just to not, particularly for breast cancer survivors, not to give up on their sex lives completely. Because I think that is, it's like almost like a double whammy of what's happening with your cancer treatment. So know that there are some other options, beyond MHT. All right. So we always try to give women, if you're not within our, local realms, although we're like expanding, we're like in Florida now, we're in Alabama, Wisconsin, it's very exciting. But if you're not within those sort of states, and you have we always like to give women some questions to take to either their GYN or their primary care doctor about where they're at with menopause. So question number 1, do you feel comfortable talking about menopause?
It's so good to ask them because they might, hopefully, if they're not, they'll say no. But then it's always a good follow-up question, like, what is your training in menopause? Like, how it's okay for you to ask your doctor, your healthcare provider, what they know and how they're comfortable talking about something.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd say this true with weight as well, right? If you're someone who really needs to lose a lot of weight and you're unsure if your doctor knows, I mean, there are pathways that you can go down to sort of learn more about this and get comfortable with all the sort of up-to-date treatment options. And so again, if you're struggling with obesity, it would be someone, make sure that you reach out to talk about not only menopause, but someone who, knows a lot about obesity medicine.
And of course, we're so proud that you are board certified in obesity medicine. And, but again, every woman deserves to have someone who knows what they're talking about.
That's right. All right.
You wouldn't talk to me about hypertension, right? So again, we all have to stay in our lane.
That's right. So what is my phase of ovarian function, right? Again, the importance of knowing exactly where this is at in terms of, disease outlook and symptom management. Your primary care doctor or GYN should be able to help you figure this out.
Well said.
All right. Number 3. Am I a candidate for MHT?
Again, it's so important to ask about this. And it's like, when am I a candidate? What am I a candidate for? What type of MHT am I a candidate for? So it's so important to be able to ask these questions and get answers that make a lot of sense and based on fact and evidence, not on hearsay or opinion or fear.
Yeah. So. All right. Awesome. How is my metabolic health? Again, we touched on this a little bit, right? Like, you really should have a fair rundown of what are your average blood sugars, what's my overall cardiovascular risk, not just, unfortunately, the insurance companies love to sort of really narrow down exactly what they believe you should have in terms of screening. But let's be honest, it's not enough, right? And so truly you should have a fair rundown of where you're at in terms of your metabolic health. And I think about that as, how does my body handle energy? Like, once my food that we eat is just the energy that's broken down and used in other ways to sort of power our muscle and power all of our cells, our brain cells. So this is like an energy flow system. And when that goes awry, so we start storing extra fat, we start storing extra fat in our liver spits out too much sugar, our liver spits out the wrong cholesterol levels. That leads to inflammation, and inflammation leads to chronic disease. So you need to kind of know, where are you at now? A lot of patients, even with pre-diabetes, which means they don't have quite the same high levels of sugar as diabetes, they're one rung below, like 50% of those people don't even know that they have that diagnosis. Don't let that be you. Sort of ask for a fair rundown of where your metabolic health is at.
Couldn't say it any better, 100%. Women should not be walking around with chronic disease and not know it.
Yeah. What is my health plan during this time? So at True, we really do, I think, one of the best jobs I've ever seen of trying to get patients' health goals, or any goals really, down on paper and understanding where they're at and what we need to do to sort of reach those goals.
And we can't help support people if we don't know what they want.
Yeah. And, your doctor really, should have, we would hope that they'd have some idea of, one, what your own health goals were, but sort of a rundown of what that next year looks like, next couple of months look like, in terms of kind of the stepwise fashion of where to get from point A to point B. I always felt as, a primary care doctor, sometimes it could be a bit of a struggle. I felt like I was giving people just such a giant list of things to do, and everyone kind of just would stare back at me like, what am I supposed to do first? What does this mean? And, a good discussion between you and your doctor could talk about the risk and benefits of, where do you want to go first? Maybe it is just working on your cardiovascular health, right? And that's what you want to do for the next 3 months, and then circling back around to maybe cancer screening or something else. So it can be helpful to have that sort of back and forth with your doctor.
Exactly. And I think we've just summed up all the ways that we can all have a menopause renaissance, whether you're 20 years before menopause or you're 10 years after. It's looking at this phase of what's going to happen, what happened, and what does that mean about my health and my life? And I'm still here thinking about it, talking about it. I'm still alive. What am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Bitner, again, I want to say I'm proud and honored to be taking care of women in this time of their lives. So it's very exciting. And I think that this science in this space is only going to expand, which is just, what a great time to be a woman.
And we'd love to contribute to this and help as many women as we can. So thank you all for participating tonight. We look forward to more comments in the future. Thanks for that comment. And we appreciate you. So everyone, take care. Be safe.
Yep. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.